Bose presents Intellivision, intelligent television by Mattel. More sophisticated than any video game that has come before, providing hours of entertainment for the entire family. Intellivision, with one of the clearest game displays available today. Find this system, plus a complete line of sports and video game cassettes at Hills, where our game is low prices every day.
Hey there Retro Games fans, this is Andy C from Piece of 8-Bit. Welcome to this week's video. And this week we will be wrapping up the Intellivision a month with. I have been living with the Intellivision, the old console, which is sitting here, and the newer Intellivision Sprint. So it's a bit of a 2-for-1 deal today. I'm going to be talking about both units. So if you're interested in getting yourself the Intellivision Sprint, do stay tuned for that. But we will also be talking about the Intellivision history. We'll be talking a little bit about some of the games I've been playing. We'll be talking about how you can get back into Intellivision in 2026. So all of that coming up, including the reveal for next month's A Month With, which I'm super excited about. So stay tuned for all of those things. I've got the chapters down below, so if you want to skip to any of the sections that you're interested in, please do just go ahead and do that. I won't be offended, I promise. So yeah, without any further ado then, let's dive straight into a little bit of the background of Intellivision and how it came to be. And I'll see you in that section. See you there. All right, let's talk a little bit about what I would consider to be a fairly storied history of the Intellivision that goes all the way back to 1979 and continues to this day. But let's go back a little bit slightly further to 1977. And in 1977, we had the launch of the world's first really commercially viable console, which was the Atari 2600. Now, Atari, a well-known brand at this point. We had Pong earlier on in the 1970s, which was the world's first commercially successful arcade machine. They pretty much, video machine that is, they pretty much pioneered the idea of coin-op video arcade machines even earlier than that with computer space. So Atari well known and pretty much a household brand at this point. So they sold a lot of 2600s. Intellivision were going to have a pretty steep battle, and obviously at this point as well, in 1979, Atari had already had a 2-year head start. So they needed to do something pretty special. They teamed up with General Instruments to come up with some out of the box hardware, essentially, that was really going to rival the power of the Atari 2600 and then go some beyond that. And that is definitely what they achieved in terms of hardware. We'll talk about the specifications in the next section. So a chap called Jack Ryan, yes, I didn't make that up, who was head of the R&D department, who kind of oversaw the development of the Intellivision. It was really kind of dreamt up by a chap called Richard Chang, who was an engineer and working directly under Ryan, and had this idea really for Intellivision. Essentially, he had this kind of vision about what he wanted to do, and he was a real internal champion for that. He was supported by a chap called David Chandler, who was really responsible for the delivery of the hardware of the platform, later becoming known as Papa Intellivision, and another chap called Gabriel Baum, who was responsible for delivering the software side. So that team, essentially supported by lots of engineers and clever people, went and built the Intellivision, which we saw launched in 1979. And it was responsible for the world's, technically, architecturally speaking, the world's first 16-bit console. We'll talk more about that in the next section as well. But it sold reasonably well. It made a 20% headway into market share. So it took 20% of the market share, selling 3.75 million units. Sold another 250,000 of the Intellivision 2, which was, Intellivision 2 was a lighter, cheaper to make console and had longer cables for your controllers, which was a good thing because the controller cables on the original one were pretty rubbish. The problem with the Intellivision 2, though, which is the next chapter in the history for Intellivision, was that it came out in 1983. Now, in 1983, for those of you who know your gaming history, there was a big crash in the market, especially in the US. Not so much over here in Europe, but certainly in the US. People were sick and tired of the overinflated prices for everything and the fact that the consoles, the console manufacturers and the games companies were just shoveling software out. So we had a really bad port of Pac-Man on the 2600. We had E.T., which notoriously ended up in landfill. You know, there was lots of games that were appearing at the time that just felt like people weren't really making any effort to make anything good or innovative, and people got fed up with it, and so it kind of crashed, and it nearly finished. Everyone thought gaming, well, a lot of people thought that gaming might be a fad, video games things just might be a passing fad, and that we wouldn't be interested in it. Thankfully, in 1983 we saw Nintendo bring the Famicom out and essentially saved the world, saved the gaming industry from obliteration. And of course, at that time as well, we also had a massive step shift in technology. But we also saw in the homes home computers like the Commodore 64, and in the UK the ZX Spectrum starting to appear as well, which really was a seismic shift in technology, but also in the way that people thought about gaming and computing and all of those kind of things. So it was quite an important time, and I think in some ways the crash maybe not such a bad thing. So, well, what happened to Intellivision? Well, Intellivision sold out to a chap called Terence Valesky, who was associated with Intellivision back in the day, and bought the company out. Despite it being a big loss-making organisation, they continued to sell the Intellivision all the way up until 1990, would you believe? Let's say there was a concept for Intellivision 3, never really happened, and that company was called INTV Corporation. Like I say, that survived until about 1990, and then it kind of bounced around. The Intellivision brand bounced around, and then in 2018 it became Intellivision Entertainment, and there was a console called the Amico, which is still, if you go and look it up on the web, it's still a console that is due to come. It's been on the cards for years and years and years. I don't think we'll see it, especially now we've seen the Sprint. And of course, it's also been hampered by the fact that in 2024, none other than the Atari company, the Atari Corporation, bought the brand Intellivision. And in fact, it is Atari that produced the Intellivision Sprint. So I don't think we'll see the Amico. I don't think it'll ever appear now. I think the Amico, is still owned by the original company, whereas so it won't be coming out in the Intellivision brand. It's quite complicated, but don't hold your breath for seeing that. So there you go. That is the kind of history of Intellivision. It goes back a long, long way, and I think Mattel had a really good stab at trying to take out Atari. It's not entirely dissimilar to when Microsoft decided that they wanted to have a go in this market and bought out the original Xbox. And when you look at the original Xbox sales versus PlayStation 2, it is almost a footnote in terms of that percentage. And that was probably less, I don't know, was it less than 20%? Probably was a bit less than 20% maybe. But obviously Microsoft persisted and they continued, and the Xbox became a much bigger brand. I often wonder what would have happened if Intellivision had done the same, if they'd kind of stuck with it, if Mattel had stuck with Intellivision and really pushed it, and whether Intellivision would still be a brand like PlayStation or Xbox nowadays. I don't know. Atari certainly isn't anymore. So, Sega isn't around making hardware anymore. So companies do come and go. So who knows? Who knows what alternative realities there might have been had Mattel stuck with Intellivision for longer. But there you go. That is a potted history of Intellivision. Let me know your thoughts as well. If I've got anything wrong in there or you want to add some clarification, please do drop a note in the comments below. But let's get on and talk now a little bit about the hardware, because this is quite interesting. So I'll see you in the next section. Right then, let's talk a little bit about hardware specifications. So just to clarify, I'm not going to be talking about the Intellivision Sprint. There's not really much point in talking about that in 2026. This is essentially an emulation bit of hardware in here, so it doesn't really apply. And in this day and age, you could run an Intellivision on your mobile phone without it even breaking a sweat. So there's not much point in talking about the hardware of that. What I want to talk about is the hardware of the original Intellivision itself. And I want to compare that this month to the Atari 2600, which was its main rival at the time. Now, interestingly, and this happens a lot, we've seen this a lot as we've done the month with series, that quite often the underdog, which the Intellivision definitely is in this generation, is the more powerful machine. And that is definitely true of the Intellivision. It is definitely the underdog, and it is definitely the more powerful machine. So we'll get into that, and there's some quite surprising stats in here. Now, it's been quite interesting trying to find out the stats for the Intellivision. So the Atari 2600 is well known. Intellivision stats, there's a few little nuances depending on where you look for the statistics as to what you'll get. So please note in the comments below if you think I've got anything wrong, because I've had to do a bit of digging around to try and find these, and it's not been so straightforward. As always, I've got my iPad to remind me. I'm not wearing my glasses this time because I've got horrendous reflection, so I might struggle to read. So if I'm straining looking at this, you'll know why. So let's start with cost before we dive into the hardware itself. Cost is quite interesting. In the US, you could pick a 2600 up for about $200. $199 is generally the considered price, whereas an Intellivision was quite a bit more expensive. It was $275. Now, adjusted for modern money, you're looking at in the region of $1,200 for the Atari, and therefore probably kind of in the region of almost maybe $1,500, around that mark now in modern money for something like that. In the UK, the prices were more similar, so it's £200 and £199 for both units, and adjusted for inflation, that's £1,000. So that is big money to be spending on a console, and something that was relatively new. So a lot of money, a lot of investment. I mean, people complain about the cost of the PlayStation 5. You could buy 2 of them and still have a chunk of change if you bought one today. So it is. It was expensive. You know, you had to be pretty fortunate to be able to pick up a console, whether that was an Atari or an Intellivision. Intellivision, though, a little bit more expensive. Might have had something to do with the reason why it wasn't quite as successful, probably coupled with the fact that Atari had been out already for 2 years, and it was a well-known, well-established brand at home and in the arcades by 1979. So Intellivision really did have an uphill sprint. So I think to achieve 20% market share and to sell, you know, around the 4 million unit mark, actually I don't think is too unimpressive, especially at the sort of money we're talking about. So let's dive into the hardware specifications themselves. We always start with CPU, so let's start with the processor. Now, the processor in the Intellivision is very interesting indeed. It's a General Instrument CP1610 or 1610, and the 1610 actually is important, at 0.9 to 1.8 megahertz, and that is, and this is the really cool part, a 16-bit processor. So 1979, remember, we didn't really see 16-bit processors in the mainstream until we started to see the 68,000 appear in machines like the Amiga, some sort of getting on for a decade later. So 16-bit in 1979 was pretty wild. Now, if you compare it to something like a 68,000 processor, you'll realise that whilst architecturally it is a 16-bit processor, it isn't quite. So you'd build it's more. Think of it more like 10-bit in terms of the software that you were producing. I won't go into the specifics of that. Now, as I mentioned as well, if any of you out there are kind of real hardware nerds, please drop some comments below, because I'm not an expert at this stuff. And finding specifications was, like I say, was a little bit tricky. There were some inconsistencies around the web. So if I've got anything wrong, I do apologise, and please do let me know below. But I had to go and do a bit more research into this whole 16-bit thing, because I thought 16-bit, is it really 16-bit? And the answer is, yeah, technically yes. But not 16-bit as we might recognise in a Mega Drive or an Amiga 500 some years later. So, system RAM, 1.5 kilobytes on the Intellivision versus 128 bytes on the Atari 2600. Now that is a little bit misleading, in as much as the idea with the 2600 really was to have it so that you essentially, a lot of the intelligence and the memory was essentially on the cartridge itself. So it's a little bit misleading, but it is obviously significantly more powerful as far as memory is concerned. We're talking very small beer in terms of memory by modern standards, of course, but by 1979 standards, quite a big difference. Video and display. So the Intellivision is capable of 160 by 96, and if we use double scan lines, we can get that to 192. And it's using an STIC GIAY3 8900. So yeah, that's why I write these things down, because I can't remember them off the top of my head. The Atari 2600 is using a TiA playfield and sprites, and that is also capable of 160 by 192, 128 PAL, and 4 lines max. 4/line max. I'll write it down below. I'll be honest with you, I don't necessarily know what that last part means. Please drop a note in the comments below, but I've had to verify all of these specifications, even if I don't necessarily know what they mean. The sound on the Intellivision was 3-tone, and we had 2 times 1-bit channels on the Atari 2600. Again, in the grand scheme of things, not really a massive difference. 16 colours available all the time on the Intellivision, and that definitely shows. It is a very, very colourful machine, where there were 128 possible colours on the Atari 2600, but you could only show 4 at a time. So quite a big difference in terms of colour, and you can see that. You know, you look at something like Burger Time, which is running behind me here. It's quite very colourful, and a little bit more reminiscent of what we started to see later on when we saw the Nintendo Entertainment System appear in the early to mid 80s. So there you go. Those are sort of generally considered the main specifications. So let's very briefly talk about some of the accessories that you could buy for the Intellivision. What you're seeing on the screen at the moment is the keyboard. You could buy a keyboard. It was quite expensive, but the idea was that Mattel felt that you could turn your Intellivision into a home computer and use it for other things as well, anything from fitness programs to managing your finances. Now, obviously, we had the controller. We didn't have the detachable joysticks or joypads on the first Intellivision, but they were detachable on the second one. Although, as far as I can tell, there weren't any alternative units that you could buy for it. But there were lots of other accessories you could plug in. It even had a 49-key piano-style keyboard, a music synthesizer. We had the voice synthesizer, which would output voice on some other games, such as Buzz Bombers, which we've already played. There was also a concept of a play cable. So this was actually allowed you, all the way back in the 1970s and early 80s, to stream video games over cable. I don't think it's something that came to the UK, but it is something that was available in the States. And they had about 20 games a month available on that. Those were kind of the main things, really. One other little interesting thing, though, there was something called the System Changer, which was basically a plugin that allowed you to play Atari 2600 games on your Intellivision. And it was just plugged in your cartridge slot, and then you plugged in the Intellivision games in the top, and away you went. So that was pretty cool. You don't tend to see that sort of thing very often. You might see the ability to be able to play a Game Boy game on your SNES, but yeah, bearing in mind that these were bitter rivals, this was an interesting decision. So there you go. That's a little bit about some of the peripherals on the Intellivision. Now I wanted to talk about what came next. So we had a ColecoVision, which came next, which is very kind of similar looking kind of unit to the Intellivision. But the really big change came in the 1980s. I mentioned before about the fact that we had a crash in 1983. We had all these consoles out there. There was a lot of money. There was a lot of shovelware. And people, especially in the States, people talk about the crash in 1983, but it only really affected the US. It wasn't necessarily a worldwide game crash. And I think that might be because in other markets, such as here in the UK, it was a bit more fledgling. You know, people didn't. I don't remember a lot of people having a lot of consoles back in the day. It was a bigger thing. You know, people talked about Atari like they talk about Nintendo nowadays out in the US, but over here, not so much of a big thing. So I think there was less heat in the market, and so we didn't necessarily see that same level of crash. But apart from the likes of Atari and Intellivision really struggling at the time, Nintendo was waiting in the wings, as was Commodore and Sinclair in the UK. And what we saw was this massive shift and this huge generational hardware leap. Also, you've got the Commodore 64 and the ZX Spectrum appearing. So the ZX Spectrum was a way for people to have a computer in their home in the UK that was really accessible price-wise. That would just undercut a lot of the consoles, but it was a computer, and introduced people to the world of programming and allowed small startup software companies to start appearing. And more popular in the US, we had the Commodore 64, which was a more expensive machine, but a lot more capable and a lot more powerful in terms of what you were able to do with it. So And of course, those two machines, the ZX Spectrum and the Commodore 64, not only were computers, but were also very, very capable of playing games. And for most people, much to Clive Sinclair's chagrin, people generally bought the ZX Spectrum to play games. He didn't want it for that, but people generally did buy it for that. So we saw a real step shift in terms of hardware, what was available, prices, choice, and everything else in 1983. So in some ways, I think the market crashing in 1983 historically was probably quite a good thing, because it kind of shook things up. People thought that gaming on computers and consoles was going to be a fad. As it turns out, Nintendo proved that that's absolutely not the case. And so we saw this real change after that crash in 1983. And that is the world that we recognise today, that is a multi-billion, possibly trillion-dollar industry around the world. So there you go. That is the hardware specifications. Next up, I am going to be talking to you a little bit about some of the games that I have been playing. I'll see you there. So, here we go. I'm going to say it. The games make the console. But is it true for the Intellivision? Is it true? Yes, I think it is true. I think it is true. There are some great games on the Intellivision. I think the choice of games, we speculated about why the Intellivision might not have been as popular as the Atari, and that might have something to do with the games. I've generally found that sort of more sports-related games seem to appear on the Intellivision for whatever reason. Maybe that was because it was just more capable. We saw baseball, basketball, tennis, football, all sorts of things like that appearing. So it was sort of almost the... I hate to say it because I might get hate for this. It was the sort of EA of the day, maybe. We were getting those kind of sports games on there which people wanted to play that were a little bit more realistic than the sorts of games that you had on the Atari 2600. So I guess it not so much makes the console, but defines the console, I think, in this particular example here. So let's talk a little bit about some of the games I've been playing. So you'll have seen some of them if you've watched them. Now, one of the things I would say is that because Intellivision wasn't as popular as the 2600, my bit betweens have been a little bit thin on the ground in terms of views, so you may not have seen it. But obviously on the bit between, I do try and cover a few games as I go. Now, one of the games that is really, really important to me is this one here, which is in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. I played Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. It was my first gaming memory, and I played it a lot on the Intellivision. I didn't own an Intellivision, but I know someone who did. And I used to play a lot around his house. So go and have a check out of my video on those early gaming memories to have a look a little bit more. I do a bit of a playthrough on Advanced Dungeons & Dragons as well. I was unfortunately unable to get hold of Trials of Tamarin, which is the Treasures of Tamarin, which is the sequel to Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, which was actually a pretty cutting edge 3D style dungeon crawler back in the day. I've never actually... I played it for a few minutes. I found it for an emulator, but if those of you who know me, I like to own the game before I go play it. So I've not been able to do that one. So maybe one day I'll pick it up. I've had a look at getting it. I'd probably have to get it imported. It's stupidly expensive to buy in the UK. You can get it from the US for a lot less money, but then obviously you've got to pay a lot of money to get it here. So at some point I might have a go with it, but we will see. So Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, really good. Lots of fun memories of that. Also played Buzz Bombers, which is sort of a Centipede-like arcade game on the Intellivision there, where you basically have to shoot bees and score high points, and you're like a bug spray, basically. It's kind of unusual. It's quite cool. It's a really quite a fun little playable game, that. Lots of fun there as well. Played a bit of Burger Time. So Burger Time is a port of the arcade classic, and it's largely considered to be one of the best ports on the, one of the best ports of Burger Time, I should say, but one of the best games also on the Intellivision. Fantastic little arcade game. Really, really frustrating. Really, really difficult. I can get to about level 4 on a good day. Yeah, you can obviously check out my video of that. Just gone from Wednesday, just gone on the bit between. And yes, I had a good go of that. Also had a play of Shark. I haven't got the box around here. Oh no, actually I played Shark on the Sprint. and I also played it on the Evercade. So it comes on the cartridges for Evercade. It also comes on the Sprint as well. And Shark is a really fun little game where you start off as a little fish and you swim around, and the shark comes in and it'll eat you, and there's bigger fish that will also eat you, and that's you. But if you eat smaller fish, you get bigger. You can nibble the shark's tail and do things like that as well. It's a really, really simple game. It's actually incredibly addictive. I really love it, and in fact, even after the bit between, I went back and played it a little bit more. I really enjoyed that. Other games that I've had a look at, so I've had a look at the port of Donkey Kong, which is not a bad version of Donkey Kong on the Intellivision. That works pretty well, based on the real arcade game it says across the top there. So that was kind of fun. I think I got this with the Intellivision when I bought it, when I bought the box Intellivision off the web. And also been playing Space Armada, which is, if you probably can gather, is a version of Space Invaders. It's okay. It's very similar in some ways to the version that you'll find on the 2600. It's a bit more colourful than the 2600 version. But it is nevertheless it's not like, it's nowhere near as good as the arcade version. It's got bigger sprites on it, and they come down quite quick. It's quite hard actually, so I played that. And then the only other one which I didn't bring down, let me see here, was also Night Stalker, which is largely considered to be one of the best games. I can't get the hang of this game. I've played it, I don't really understand it. Let me know in the comments. It's sort of a maze type game, and there's zombies and spiders and things in it, but I don't really understand what it is you're trying to achieve on it. I don't really get it, but it's okay. Oh, all the stuff's just falling out there. It's okay, but yeah, a lot of people really like this game, so I need to give it a bit more time. But play that for a little bit. I haven't played that loads. That's probably the main list of games that I have been playing on the Intellivision, and I have really enjoyed it. It was great going back to play Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, but despite that being my first gaming memory, the games I've enjoyed the most are more of the sort of arcade-style games. Buzz Bombers, Shark, Donkey Kong, and Burger Time. I loved playing Burger Time, but I think my favourite has probably been Shark, actually. Out of all the games that I've played, I think that's the one I've enjoyed playing, and that's the one I probably go back and play more as well. There are plenty of others that I've also had a bit of a go at. There's quite a lot of stuff on the Sprint, and also on the Evercade as well, which I'll talk about when we get into the how you can get back into Intellivision in 2026 in the next section. So yeah, I think all in all quite good. I think it's definitely true that the games look better and play a little better on the Intellivision. However, there is one caveat to that. So, and that is these things, right? So this is the Intellivision Sprint version. These controllers, and I'll talk more about this in my wrap up at the end, but these controllers are pretty terrible. Now, obviously on the Atari, you've got a joystick, or you've got the little dials for doing your Pong, your little paddles. These are not great. Now, what I like about the Intellivision, I'm just going to dig one out here. What I do like about the Intellivision is that you get these little inserts with it. So every game will come with, and if you're buying Intellivision games, it's really important that you check that you've got these inserts, because sometimes it's quite important. And they will slot into the top of your controller, if you can do it. There we go, like so. And basically what that does is that gives context to the buttons that are underneath there. But as a whole, this is not great. It's sort of like a D-pad type thing. On the original here, obviously it is wired, which means that you don't have a lot of play in it, but they do spin round. So yeah, there's that. But your fire button is on the side, so the way that you play, it's more like a remote control. And now, sometimes, you know, like if you play a game on Netflix or something nowadays and you're using your remote control to do it, it isn't great. It's not a great experience. So I don't love these controllers at all. I think it's the weakest part about the Intellivision, and again, that might also be another contributing factor. But I do like the concept of the inserts. I like the idea that you know, like ultimately you can sort of customize the controller. But it is important, like I say, when you're buying Intellivision games, if you're looking to buy an old one, that you make sure that you've got all the inserts with the game. It's usually 2 in each one, as there's only 2 controllers. Sometimes it's a one-player game, but it still comes with 2 inserts. Important to remember that. But yes, controller-wise, that does let the gaming thing down. So some games will work better than others. Generally speaking, if you're playing on something like the Evercade, I find you get a better experience with the arcade games with an ordinary D-pad than you do with this. But then there are some specific games on here. There's like a one where you've got to disarm a bomb, which I couldn't get the hang of. It's another game I played. Yeah, you need the buttons because there's lots of different things that you can do and wires that you cut and all that sort of stuff. So sometimes these controllers are essential. Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, if you watch my video back, I actually really struggled to play that on an ordinary controller emulated because the control scheme is weird, so you kind of need to play it on something like that. So there you go. That is those are the games. Sorry, I forgot what I was doing then for a second. Those are the games that I've been playing through the month. So next I'm going to tell you a little bit about how you can get back into gaming in 2026 with Intellivision. So I'll see you in there. Right, so if you're interested in getting back into Intellivision, and I would generally say this, that people who want to get back into Intellivision are people that generally remember Intellivision. I think if you've not played Intellivision much before, I think you could potentially end up being a little bit disappointed by it. So yeah, that would be just my suggestion. If you're thinking, I've never really played Intellivision before, I'm kind of interested in it. If you're interested in the history, great. If you're interested in just going and playing some Intellivision games and seeing what they're like, and you've never played them before, you might find yourself a little disappointed. That would be my point here. But if you are interested generally in getting back into Intellivision, it is very easy to do, and there are loads of different ways of doing it. So in the next section, I'm very briefly going to talk about Intellivision. I'm going to have an extra section in my month with this month, as if this video isn't long enough already, and I will talk a little bit about my feelings on the Intellivision Sprint. But that is, of course, one option. You can pick these up for about £100 at the moment. They will come down in price, no doubt. If the 2600 Plus is anything to go by, and it's essentially the same company that's built this, then you will find this will probably come down in price. So keep an eye open for it. If you're interested in doing it on Black Friday or something like that, that will be the time to buy it. The other option, if you've got an Evercade or you're thinking about getting an Evercade, is Evercade. There are 2 cartridges. Oh, here we go. There are 2 cartridges that I've found so far, that I own anyway. I'm not aware of any more, but please tell me if there are others. And so we've got, how many games? 12 on there, and we've got 12 on there. So 24 games in total. Not everything on here is on the Sprint and vice versa, although the Sprint has most of the games that are on here. There's only a couple of exceptions. So if you've already got an Evercade and you're interested in getting into Intellivision, these aren't a bad shout. One game that is on here that isn't on there is Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. So if that's a game you want to go play, Evercade is the way to go get that. The nice thing about Evercade cartridges, of course, is these are not anywhere near as expensive as buying a whole machine. They're easy to store, and there's a good selection of games on here that you can get on and play. So Evercade Intellivision cartridges, collection 1 and 2, which I've got here. You know, to be honest with you, this is probably where I'm going to end up in future playing most of these games. Some of the games that we got included on here, this is probably I don't have my glasses on. Auto Racing, Motocross, Tower of Doom, Vectron's really good. Reverse is quite fun, just simple game. We've obviously got Cloudy Mountain, which I mentioned. Shark. Is Cloudy Mountain on here, or did I just make that up? Yes, it is. That's on number 2. Buzz Bombers is also on here. Snafu, which is a bit like a sort of Tron game. It's another game I also played. That is also on there as well. So Intellivision would be my if you've got Intellivision on Evercade would be my recommendation if you haven't got any of the original hardware. Obviously you can pick up the hardware itself, the original hardware, but you'll need a television that will take an old-fashioned analog TV signal. So this one TV behind me does. But you can generally pick up a Intellivision unit quite reasonably. I've picked mine up, I think it was about £120 quite a while ago now, about a year ago, but they put 6 games in it. So, you know, I had a good little head start with that, and it came boxed. and it is in beautiful condition. And I don't think it's been played very much. I think it's been sitting in an attic somewhere, and somebody's not really played on it. So it felt new. You put the cartridges in, it was like the machine was brand new, and everything just worked. I didn't really need to do much with the cartridges. Some just needed a bit of isopropyl to clean, and that worked really, really well. Now, one thing I would say is that if you're thinking about getting the Sprint, you can't put the cartridges in the Sprint like you can on the 2600. I'll talk about that again also when I do the review in a moment. So those are your sort of main hardware kind of options, really. So Evercade, Intellivision Sprint, or the original hardware itself. And yeah, because there's not a lot of moving parts in that, so they're generally pretty robust machines. You can pick them up. Like I say, at the moment they're quite cheap, and they're probably quite a good investment, I would think, for the future. The other option, of course, as always, is to emulate. Emulation is very, very easy. You might find that you need a couple of BIOS ROMs to get it working, but again, they're very, very easy to find if your emulator doesn't work. The recordings I've been doing are on OpenEMU, and you can also generally find most of the games out there on the web quite easily. And you can, I think there's a pack, it might be on somewhere like the Internet Archive or something like that. You can download the entire collection on there, for instance, if you want to do that. Yeah, I'll leave that moral judgment with yourselves, of course. So lots and lots of easy ways to get into it, and the emulation, like I said, is very, very easy. The downside with emulation, as I mentioned before, is the fact that control mapping is somewhat of a problem, whereas if you go for something like the Evercade, they've already thought about that, so it's not too bad at all. So there you go. That is how you can get back into Intellivision gaming in 2026. Lots of options for you there. So now what I'm going to do before we kind of wrap up and I give you my opinions, I'm just going to very quickly talk to you about the Intellivision Sprint and what that has been like to live with. I'll see you in that section. Right, let's talk a little bit about the Intellivision Sprint then. So the Intellivision Sprint came out tail end of last year, 2025, and if you're thinking about getting back into Intellivision gaming and you're a big Intellivision fan but you don't want the hassle of having the original, or you don't want to spend that kind of money, although to be honest, finding an original actually isn't all that much more expensive, you can pick up the Intellivision Sprint, but it's a very, very nice unit, and it is very much in keeping with the style of the original. The only difference really is probably about 80-90% of the size of the original, but everything else is pretty true to form. It's nice and light. The original is quite heavy, and of course the beauty of it is it comes with wireless controllers, which is a big deal, because the cables on the original were pretty small. Obviously comes nicely boxed, so we get the box there, which you saw. You can have a look at my unboxing video if you're interested in that side of it, my first impressions. Inspired by the original box, I would say. You know, it's got a lot of the similar colours and everything else like that, and comes with a really good selection of games as well. So we spoke about Shark, which you can see on here, and Boulder Dash, another game that I didn't mention actually, which is really, really good. We've also got other things like B-17 Bomber, Bomb Squad, which was that bomb game that I talked to you about earlier. Had a bit of a go at that. Tower of Doom, Star Strike, Space Battle, Night Stalker, spoke about those as well. So a really good selection, about 45 games in total. And you can also sideload games on USB, although I didn't do that. One of the reasons I didn't do that was because the little inserts that come with the games, you get a pack of them for all the games. So for every game on the Intellivision Sprint, you get the two little boxes like this with all of the inserts for all of the games on. And they fit very nicely into the Intellivision Sprint controllers. If, however, you have a game like this on the original Intellivision and you want to take the little inserts from here and insert them into there for you to play on your side-loaded USB side-loaded game, they won't fit. And that's largely because this is a bit smaller, and so the original inserts don't work from the the bigger inserts don't work on this console, which is a bit of a shame, a bit of an oversight. And one of the other things that also you can't do is there is no slot for your cartridges, so you would expect to see that here. On the Atari 2600, on the Atari 2600 Plus, you can put original Atari 2600 Plus cartridges in, which I think is a fantastic feature. I don't own an original 2600 Plus, 2600, sorry, and I don't need to, because I've got a load of cartridges and I can put them all on the 2600 Plus without having to do any kind of side loading or anything else like that. Now, On the 2600 Plus, you can't sideload on USB. So it's like, which would you prefer? Would you prefer to be able to load any game that you want from that you can find out on the web, on a ROM, and sideload it, which is great, but then not be able to use the inserts in the controller, which is a bit of a bummer? Or would you prefer it if you could go and buy the original cartridges and then pop those in a modern console? I would quite like both, to be honest with you. Call me greedy, but I quite like to be able to do both. Never mind. It's a sort. I say it's a minor detail. I don't think it is a minor detail. I think some people are actually a little bit miffed about it, and I'm surprised that there wasn't a cartridge slot on the Intellivision. So it's a bit of a shame, and it is a bit lacking. But yeah, from a hardware perspective, it's pretty good. From a software perspective, also really, really good. I mentioned that we got those 45 games in there. Also got the nice carousel that we're used to seeing, and we see that on things like the Evercade. We see it on some of the other mini consoles that you get, the mini Mega Drives and the PlayStation, all that kind of thing, the little carousel that you get. Again, very similar on here, very, very similar to the 2600 Plus. It's just a carousel with a load of games on it, and that's it, and a couple of very minor settings. And that's it, really. And the nice thing about this, of course, compared to an original one, is we've got a good selection of ports at the back. So we've got some couple of USB ports. We've got a USB port. We've got port 1 and port 2. I'm not entirely sure what they're for. And we're powered by USB-C, which is also a big deal as well. But the key thing, the most important thing, is HDMI. So we can plug this in, and I've had this in the living room. So I've had this one sitting in here, plugged into an old LCD TV here. And then I've had that one in the living room. So I've had a bit of choice of when I can play. And then I've got my portable Evercade. I've also got the Evercade in the living room as well. So I've got a good selection of different ways to play. But the nice thing about the Sprint is it's been sitting in the living room. It's powered by USB-C, which is nice and easy. It's plugged in by HDMI, which is nice and easy. And I can just pick up one of those wireless controllers, switch it on, and away we go. So all in all, I like it. I think they missed the trick by not having the cartridge slots in there. It is still quite pricey at £99. I don't know what it is in the US, but I would strongly suggest waiting until it comes down a little bit in price. I bought it because it had just come out. Really, to be honest with you, if it wasn't for this channel, see, I do these things for you people. I probably would have waited to buy it at a slightly cheaper price. It's annoying that you can't fit the original inserts from the original games in there. That's a bit of a shame. Yeah, I don't really know what the answer to that is. Maybe somebody out there might have a little business idea if enough of these sell to go and make some smaller versions of the inserts, perhaps. I wouldn't recommend going and trimming them, plus the fact they won't line up anyway, so I definitely wouldn't recommend butchering your inserts. I don't know, maybe you could print some on some thick card or something. I don't know. I don't think that's a good idea either. So not sure what the answer is. I think probably just having it next to you and just remembering what the buttons are is probably the only real way to go. A bit of blue tack on the top of the controller or something. I don't know. I have a good answer for it. So there you go. That is Intellivision Sprint. Good. I don't think it's as good as a 2600 Plus because you don't have that flexibility around the cartridges. I would personally rather have the cartridges and the USB option, which is weird. I would like both. I think the criticism of both is that they don't do both. When you look at something like the Spectrum, I don't suppose having said that, you don't plug a tape into the Spectrum. So I don't know. Yeah. So yeah, pretty good. My other main issue, of course, is for most people, I think Intellivision is probably going to be something that they're going to be thinking, I never really played on it. It's not something I remember too much. And so forking out £100 for something that, you're just, is a curiosity, is probably going to be a bit of a stretch. My recommendation would be to buy the Intellivision cartridges on the Evercade. If you've got an Evercade, that would be the way to go if you want to play the games, I think. That would be my advice there. So there you go. That is my very quick review of the Intellivision Sprint. If you're into Intellivision and you want to buy one, definitely go find yourself one. Maybe wait for the price to come down. If you've never played Intellivision before and you're just interested, I would check out the Evercade cartridges instead, or go and find some emulated ones as well. If you're really interested, before you buy, at least you might go and have a go with the Evercade ones and go, actually, you know what, I really enjoy this. Then go buy the Sprint. But yeah. That would be my advice to you. Okay, right. This video has been going on for about a year. It's much like January. So I'm going to just now talk to you about what it's been like to actually live with the Intellivision and the Intellivision Sprint for the last month, and then we'll wrap up. I'll see you there. So, what has it been like to live with the Intellivision for the month of January? It feels like a long time because January feels like a long time. We're on this, like, 73rd of January or whatever it is now. This video is also dragging out, so I apologise for that. Hopefully you've been able to use the chapters to skip to the bits that you care about. Largely longer because I wanted to cover the Intellivision Sprint as a separate section on its own as well, just to give you a bit of a heads up on what that's been like. But I wanted to include it as part of the whole package because living with Intellivision Sprint is pretty much the same as living with Intellivision. It is a pretty accurate representation of the original unit. So, how have I found it? I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the walk down memory lane. I went to Retro Collective a couple of weeks ago, and it's been nice to kind of immerse myself in those early gaming days, to get on and play Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. Where is it? Here. Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, which is my first gaming memory, and to be able to talk to you all about that has been really, really cool as well. The games I've actually enjoyed, though, this is not a game that I massively enjoyed going back and playing because it's really hard. What I've enjoyed playing is the arcade games, you know, the Buzz Bombers, the Burger Time, Shark. Those are the sorts of games that I've really enjoyed playing, and to be honest with you, I've enjoyed playing them more on the Evercade and the Evercade in the living room, the full-size console in the living room, with modern controllers and D-pads and things like that, more so than I have playing it on the actual on here, because the controllers on the Intellivision, I'm sorry, but they are just not that great. Yeah, when we talked about console design a while ago, we talked about maybe talking about the best and worst controllers, and I have to say this is definitely going to appear in my list of worst controllers. These controllers are not great. I like the idea that you can customize them with the inserts. That's fantastic. I don't like the fact that you can't put your old inserts into the new controllers. That's a bummer. So the side loading is a little bit, you know, it makes that a bit of a weaker proposition. I don't like the fact you can't put the original cartridges in here either. So that's a bit of a bummer from that point of view. In terms of the original hardware itself, well, you know, it works fine. It's great, and continues to work fine. It is a robust unit. I love the look of it, and I have enjoyed it from a nostalgia point of view. It's been great. From a gaming point of view, there have been some good moments, and there have been some average moments. Let's put it that way. I don't want to be too harsh because it is, you know, it's a console that's getting on for, well, in a few years' time it'll be 50 years old. So let's not judge it too harshly. But I think you know, as I said in the last section, if you remember Intellivision and you enjoyed Intellivision from a nostalgia point of view, it's great to go get back into it. If you don't really have any memories of Intellivision, I think you might find yourself a little bit disappointed, which is why I would generally recommend going and finding the Evercade cartridges rather than actually going and finding the Sprint itself or an original console. Intellivision games themselves are actually also quite hard to find. So if you do get yourself an original one, actually going and sourcing cartridges is not the easiest thing now. Obviously they didn't sell as many as 2600, so there's not as many cartridges out there in the first place. And certainly in the UK, they're a little bit harder to find. You can import them, but that's quite expensive to do that. Generally, the only place you'll find cartridges is at a show or at a market, and even then, you'll only find one or two people that are actually selling them, and they won't generally have a big selection, and they'll mostly be the sports ones. So it's quite hard to get back into the original hardware just from a sourcing games point of view. I've got, how many games? Probably, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15, maybe 15 games in total. So having the Sprint is nice, and the Evercade cartridges, because that adds sort of another kind of 50 odd games to the collection without having to go and find them all out there, although I've already got quite a few of the ones that are on both of these anyway because they're common. So yeah, it's been an interesting experience. I have enjoyed it. I've been looking forward to doing it. I've been looking forward to talking to you all about my first gaming memories. So from that point of view, it's been good. From a 2026 perspective, Intellivision serves really as nothing more than a piece of nostalgia. And to be fair, I think the 2600 also fits in that category as well. And it wasn't really until we started to see the likes of the NES, Commodore 64, the Spectrum in the early 80s when I think that really changed. And there's a lot more stuff in there, and there is still some stuff that should be left in the past, but there's a lot more stuff in there that you kind of want to go back and play that just was a little bit better. than that early kind of second generation of consoles. So there you go. That is those are my views. Let me know your thoughts and memories about the Intellivision, whether you've managed to pick up a Sprint and your thoughts on that, and some of your early gaming memories, and if they were on the Sprint, on the Intellivision, I should say, or other. And yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas about that. Hope that was useful. Hope that gives you some ideas about how you can get back into Intellivision if that's something you're interested in doing. Just leaves me to talk now about what's coming up, and of course that also at the end of every month with wrap up episode, there is a new console to announce. Now I am quite excited about this one because this is a console that I don't have a lot of experience of, but there's a few games on here which I absolutely love. Another console which I don't have a lot of games for because they're hard to find, and the reason is because it wasn't a console that sold all that well, but it is a console I'm sort of excited about, and that is, drum roll, that is the Sega Saturn. Didn't really leave enough time for a drum roll there, did I? That is the Sega Saturn. So this was from the same generation as the PlayStation 1, the original PlayStation, and the N64. And it was Sega's kind of doomed console, really. So we'll get into all of that as we go through the month. But there are some games on here which I absolutely adore, so we will be playing those. I've already played a couple of games on the Saturn already, so yeah, I've emulated a couple that I've got just to kind of get into it. So this will be going in the living room. I'll be hooking this up, and yeah, we'll be getting stuck in with that. So really that's what's coming up through February, is going to be mostly Sega Saturn stuff. So I want to be looking at things like Sega Rally, which is one of the best console versions of that arcade classic. We've also got Daytona on there as well. We've got Alien on there. So there are some good games. It is a shame it was a doomed platform, but like I said, we will get into all of that. So keep your eye open through February, and as we get stuck in with Sega Saturn, obviously also let me know your thoughts and memories, and if there's any games you want me to see if I can try and hunt down. I haven't got a big budget, and a lot of Sega Saturn games is really, really expensive, so that's why I don't have a lot of games for it. But if there is anything you think you might want me to have a look at, let me know in the comments below or as we go through the bit between. So stay tuned for all of that. If you enjoyed those videos, if you enjoyed this video or any of my other videos for that matter, please do hit that like and subscribe button. I really appreciate it and loved all the support I've been getting on the channel just lately. Love to hear all your comments and thoughts as well. I am now rambling, so I am going to wrap up. But yeah, until the next time, please do all take care of yourselves, and we'll see you in the next one. Until then, bye for now.